The 523rd edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! Got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony coming at you live late on a Tuesday night. I have been home all of 10 minutes from being out at the ACC Tournament, which is why we're recording as late as we are this evening. And we'll be quite frank and be quite honest with you. Our recording schedule over the next couple of days is going to be very much in flux as we are balancing duties between work and then taking care of the podcast. It all depends on how long the Tar Heels play will ultimately determine how often we're on here recording this late in the evening. The Heels have learned their opponent for the second round of the ACC Tournament. That is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and we're here to get you ready for that matchup. We'll tell you everything you need to know about Notre Dame, look at the game from Carolina's perspective, have a discussion about the team going into what's going to be a make-or-break week for their NCAA tournament hopes, give our keys to the game, pick the game before we get out of here. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. It is March, and for Carolina, it is do or die. Therefore, we go to the same pod thought that we use every time this time of the year. It's the foundation of this program. It's the sayings that I tweet before every single game, and it's words that we live by as Carolina basketball fans. And that pod thought is simply play hard, play smart, play together. And that's what this team has done the last 3.5 weeks, even though they're coming off a disappointing loss at home to Duke. That snapped a 6-game winning streak. I do think that they validated a lot of what they did during the winning streak in the loss to the Blue Devils. We didn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about that on Saturday night because we were just coming off the aftermath of literally losing the rivalry game, being in the building while watching Carolina lose the rivalry game. And so in that moment, it was really hard to reflect on how I thought Carolina held its own in that game and how they validated all the things they did during the winning streak. It wasn't just a team that beat up on bad opponents. Like, I think it's fair to say that Carolina has turned into a good basketball team, a quality basketball team. And that's because they've played hard, they've played smart, they've played together. And if they do that over the course of this week in Charlotte, I'm confident that they can put themselves in a position to have a chance to get that quad one win they need to really push their tournament resume over the top. And I wouldn't rule out them doing enough to maybe win 4 games in 4 days if they play to the way that they've played over the last 3 weeks over the next couple of days at the Spectrum Center in Uptown Charlotte.
Yeah, you'd like to believe that that is the case, and I think that there is certainly an argument with the way that they played the other night, the way that they fought, and took a lead on Duke in the second half. That is possible, but you have to see, because unfortunately the path that you have is way more difficult than you were hoping that it would be. You don't have the quad one opportunity there in SMU that you were hoping was going to be there. I mean, that Florida State team that they lost to, by the way, loses in the first round of the ACC tournament. So just beautiful all around from SMU. They clearly, in my mind, probably looked at the situation they were in. I wouldn't doubt if that was a game that they probably lost to try to help themselves out, to try to make a run and pick up a couple of quad one wins, because they're a team that doesn't have a single quad one win. So they're looking for 1 or 2 here to even give themselves an opportunity. So, yeah, I think Carolina is in a tough spot where they're going to more than likely have to face Duke if they find a way to beat Wake Forest in that 4-5 matchup. But can't look ahead. You got to take it one game at a time, because as the first day of the tournament showed you, there are a lot of upsets that are out there that are possible if you are not careful.
Yeah, no, March it's here, it's been here, and the magic of March has already been seen over the last handful of days, with Champ Week really getting going. You had a bunch of bids that were secured tonight, and the ACC tournament got underway, the Big 12 tournament got underway. Then you'll be getting ready for the SEC, the Big 10, the Big East, and these types of what happens is the week builds momentum, and hopefully Carolina is a part of that positive momentum where they get hot and they can really ride this thing into maybe the final on Saturday night. But also there's the momentum of upsets, and as you mentioned, we've already seen a couple today in the ACC tournament. You've seen some. And in the one bid leagues as well, with some of their conference tournaments coming to an end. And, you cannot take anything for granted. It is, that sense of emergency that Hubert Davis talks about has to be at the highest sense that it's been so far this season. Before we get to the Notre Dame preview, did just kind of want to give some good artifacts, some good notes of a little on this day in UNC history. And, back in 1967 on this day, Carolina beat Duke in the ACC tournament final behind the L&M boys, Larry Miller and Bobby Lewis. Larry Miller scored 32 points. Bobby Lewis added 26 to earn Coach Smith his first ever ACC tournament title, and what would be a string of ACC tournament championships and a string of 3 consecutive Final Four. So that happened on this day back in 1967. And then on this day back in 2007, Carolina won its first ACC tournament title under Roy Williams. So don't know if you put a whole lot of stock into that. I read it as a good omen. We're in the time of the year where you need all the positive thoughts and vibes that you can have when you need a team to go on a run, like Carolina has to go on a run this week. And so I thought those were just 2 really good notes, artifacts to set the scene for what's going to be a very important week for Carolina while they are in Charlotte. Let's now turn our attention to the opponent, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They advanced to the second round after beating Pittsburgh 55-54 in the first round game earlier this afternoon. It was the first game of the tournament, and it allowed Notre Dame to improve to 15-17 on the year. They were 8-12 in the ACC during the regular season. They won on a free throw with a half a second left to go. After Pittsburgh was called for one of the worst fouls I have ever seen in the closing second of a ball game. But nonetheless, the whistle was blown, and Notre Dame made the free throw they had to make to ensure themselves a victory. on neutral floors, which of course this tournament's being played on. They are 1-3 on the year. Away from South Bend overall in true road games, they were 3-12. They have 3 players average double figure scoring, led by Marcus Burton, 22.2 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, 3.1 assists. He's shooting 45% from the field, 39% from three. Tay Davis, their second leading scorer, at 15.4 points, 5.4 rebounds, 1.8 assists. He's shooting 49% from the field, 33% from three. And then Braden Shrewsbury, the last guy to average double figure scoring, the son of head coach Micah Shrewsbury. He is averaging 14 points, 3 rebounds, 1.6 assists, shooting 41% from the field, 37% from three, but he will not be in uniform tomorrow. So that knocks Notre Dame down from 3 guys that average double figure scoring all the way down to just 2. Been an interesting year for Notre Dame. Of course, they played Carolina extremely tough back in early January, where Elliot Cadeau had to make a 4-point play in the closing seconds to give Carolina the victory. Remember, Marcus Burton had a really good look to win the game in the closing seconds, was unable to hit the shot. Carolina played the same defense in that game to what they kind of did against Stanford a little bit later in the year. Jalen Blakes took a different shot than Marcus Burton got, but nonetheless, Carolina did not execute their defense there in the final seconds the way that they've wanted to. Michael Shrewsbury has gone on, I believe it's 2 rants this year when addressing the struggles of his team. This is a man that inherited a program that was used to a lot of success under Mike Bray. He had done a really good job at Penn State, and the recruiting would suggest that he's going to make Notre Dame a winner once again. That has not been the case so far this season, but saw them in person today. Marcus Burton is as electric a guard as you're going to find in this conference. They space the floor very well. They compete. He coaches very, very hard. I could hear some of the things he yelled at his kids quite clearly today during the course of the ball game. And so make no mistake about it. The record that they're bringing into this game is not impressive. It's not attractive, but this is a team that has played Carolina close already once this season, and they'll be looking to do the same thing again tomorrow afternoon when the second round of the ACC tournament gets underway.
Yeah, they're much better than their record would suggest to you. Today, Marcus Burton really showing you why he is the conference's leader in scoring. He is as good as any guard in this conference. And much like a guy that you saw later on in the night, J.J. Starlings, who is a really good player for Syracuse, it's just that he doesn't really have a lot of help. Tay Davis is that other guy. And then you had Braden Shrewsbury, but he suffered a season-ending injury, and that's the reason why he's not going to play in this game. So their offense, it looked the part of a team that lost a significant scorer in this one, but they just got lucky that Pittsburgh played an ugly brand as well. They escaped with a 55-54 win. So this is a game that should serve Carolina well because this is a team that isn't healthy. It's a team that's struggling to score right now. And the way that Carolina has been playing against teams like this, it would make you believe that they should be able to win this game and potentially win it by double digits. But with how close that first game was, that Notre Dame is a team that is going to remember some of the things that they did well in that game and try to, duplicate that, make some adjustments in some areas where they struggled a little bit in that one. And you're talking about one of the coaches that I think has been given a lot of criticism, which is sort of unfair. I think we knew that it was going to take some time to build here, because this is not a program that has NIL money in it. They don't give a damn about basketball at Notre Dame. Like, you think some of the SEC teams don't care about basketball? No, it's nothing compared to Notre Dame. This is a school that you knew it would take him some time to get some talent, especially around a guy like Marcus Burton. And right now it's not there. But Carolina's still got to be aware of this group, because when you've got a guy that can score it the way Burton can, he was the big reason why they were able to almost beat Carolina the first time around, and that was when he was coming off the bench, his lone non-start of the year after he came back from an early season injury. Carolina's got to be aware of him in this game and find a way to make somebody else beat you.
Yep, and I think that's going to be something that was emphasized leading up to the game, is make their role players beat you. And look, Tay Davis is a quality player. And I think if there's one thing about Notre Dame is that they do play hard, but they don't have the talent across the board, and they don't really have the depth, I think, to really keep up with Carolina if the Carolina that we saw the last 3 weeks of the regular season shows up. And that's going to be the key for the Heels in this game is, you've now had, almost 4 days to get over the loss to Duke, regroup, regather, and then you got to go chase after this week. And you got to do it one game at a time. You can't be looking ahead to Wednesday or to Thursday. You can't be looking ahead to a potential third matchup of the season with Duke. It's got to be one game at a time. And I think it helps. I think it helps Schubert Davis. I think it helps his coaching staff that the first opponent is a team that played them very tough. Like if this was a team that Carolina, let's say it was California, for example, a team that Carolina just, boat raced, I do think it would be harder to maybe get their attention going into this game. I don't think that's going to be the case with this one. They know how lucky they were to win against Notre Dame earlier this year. Granted that was on the road. This game will be on a neutral floor, but Michael Shrewsbury is a quality coach. He can draw up some stuff. He can really make life very hard for you. And make no mistake about it, they're going to try to muck the game up tomorrow like they did today. That game was ugly, man. As someone that loves basketball and appreciates seeing quality basketball, that's not what you saw this afternoon. But that's the way Notre Dame has to play right now. And so they're going to try their best to kind of recreate that tomorrow. And it's going to be Carolina's job to make sure that they're the ones that setting the tone. They're the ones that are dictating the terms in which the game is going to be played. So you look at this game from Carolina's perspective, they bring with them a 20-12 record. They went 13-7 in the ACC, and they won 6 of their last 7 games to close out the regular season. In the 6 wins prior to the loss to Duke, they were averaging 90.8 points per game. Duke held them to 69 on Saturday night. Neutral site games, Carolina 2-3 on the year, including 0-1 in Charlotte when they lost to Florida back in the Jumpman Invitational. One of those games that if Carolina misses the tournament, that is a game we'll point back to and say if they get that win, they're in the field, because Carolina was up 4 with 2 minutes to go and was not able to get the job done. Neutral site wins, though. Wins over Dayton and UCLA. Neutral site losses, Auburn, Michigan State, and the aforementioned Florida Gators. The Carolina has 3 players averaging double-figure scoring, led by a newly named second-team all ACC member, R.J. Davis, 17.3 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, 3.8 assists. He is shooting 41% from the field, 33% from 3. Ian Jackson, he was just named to the all-freshman team for the ACC for this past year. He's the second leading scorer, 13.3 points, 2.9 rebounds, 0.9 assists. He's shooting 48% from the field, 41% from 3. And Seth Trimble is the last guy to average double-figure scoring. He's averaging 11.9 points, 5.2 rebounds, 1.4 assists. He is shooting 44% from the field and 30% from 3. Let's get into our discussion topic here before we give our keys to the game and make our picks for Carolina and Notre Dame. That game will come your way at approximately 2:30 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Going into the Duke game, we'd built up confidence and trust with 6 straight wins, but more so not just because they had won 6 straight, but the way that they had looked while winning 6 straight. Carolina had looked dominant. They were blowing teams out. They were, beating people up on the glass. They had become the best three-point shooting team in the country during that time span. They were scoring the balls, as we mentioned there, left and right. And they did, I think, some of those things for a short period of time against Duke on Saturday night. Could not sustain it over the course of 40 minutes, which is nothing to be it's something to be upset about. It's hard to be mad about because not many teams have been able to play at a high level against Duke so far this year. But you look at where Carolina is right now. A loss all but eliminates them from NCAA tournament conversation. They have to, at a minimum, get to Friday to really have a hope of making the tournament. If they have some results break their way, some teams get upset, maybe it opens a path for them to make the tournament without getting that second quad one win. But we know at a minimum this team has to get to Friday. We know what the month of March is. We know how magical this month can be. We've seen some of the upsets, some of the drama in the one bid leagues, and we're already starting to see it both in the ACC tournament and then some of the other bigger conference tournaments around the country as well. Where is your confidence in this group to not let the Duke game carry over into this game and bounce the heels early from this year's ACC tournament?
I think it's pretty high, but yeah, I mean, it's hard for that not to creep into your head when you did have basically 3 upsets. I know that Notre Dame was considered the 12th seed because of their conference record and tiebreakers and everything. Pittsburgh was the more talented team. Pittsburgh was the better team coming into today. And yet somehow Notre Dame found a way to win that game. You have the upset of Cal over Virginia Tech. Cal, a team that, like Notre Dame, it was coming off of playing 4 overtimes in their final game of the regular season. They went to double overtime and found a way to win that game in an amazing fashion where they just went on a tear to start the overtime. And then Syracuse pulls the upset over Florida State. So it was a day of upsets in the first round. And so that's what I think makes you think, is it possible that we see that continue into the second day? This is not one of those games that should be like that, though. That first matchup, yes, it was in part because it was there. Carolina has struggled in South Bend. That's always been a place where, for as long as I can remember, really since the Zach August days, that was really when Carolina started to struggle there. And it seems like every year, whenever they go there, no matter when it is, no matter how good Notre Dame is, Carolina is always going to have, one of their nail-biting performances, let's say, against them. This should not be one of those. This is one of those games where Carolina should be able to control a lot of what goes on. They've got more talent. They've got, you could argue, better depth. I think Notre Dame may have more guys that they're going to just throw out there. But in terms of guys that can actually make legitimate contributions to the game, you would lean Carolina. And so I feel pretty confident in this group, especially with the way that they were playing against, the lesser competition that are very similar to this Notre Dame team during that 6-game winning streak. I think they'll be able to take care of business in this one.
Yeah, I think there was, while the players expressed disappointment on Saturday, I think they did express confidence that, they would, come off the emotional, I guess, low of losing to Duke, but be ready to go and compete. And I've said this, and I'll reiterate this because I truly believe it. That was not the case 2 years ago when Carolina was in this position. Like when Carolina lost that game to Duke 2 years ago, that team, like if that team could have opted out of the ACC tournament, they would have, because they were done, because they knew they weren't capable of doing what had to be done that week to still hear their name called on Selection Sunday. I still think this team believes they can do what they need to do this week. And maybe they're living under false hope. But I do think that there's just a different confidence, a different aura that does exist. I do think that, for guys like RJ Davis, Jalen Withers, and Ty Claude, like now, like Saturday, the finality of losing the game to Duke on Saturday means that every time this team takes the floor this week, it could be their last, which should bring upon that sense of urgency, that sense of emergency that we talk about. So, I think it's fair to expect Carolina to play well. You would expect there to be more Carolina fans in the building than Notre Dame fans to provide some sort of just life and energy to the building, and give something Carolina to kind of play behind. I think it helps that Notre Dame had to play, 40 minutes to have to win today, as opposed to being able to get your guys some rest throughout the duration of the game. So, and I think Hubert Davis, may not mention some of the other results from around the country, but in this day and time, man, these kids are aware. These guys know what's going on. This isn't the 70s and the 80s where you literally did not know what happened until you got the paper the next day, or if someone wired you the information. Like, these guys know what's going on. And so I think they'll be locked in. They'll be focused, because I don't think they want to be remembered as a team that, just flamed out in the ACC tournament and all but deny themselves a chance of putting themselves in some sort of position to receive an at-large bid to make the NCAA tournament. Let's get now into our keys to the game before we make our picks. The first thing that we'll talk about is actually what you have written down on the third key of the game. But for me, the Carolinas get off to a fast start, and they got to get off to a fast start defensively. That they did not do that Saturday against Duke. Duke raced out to a 36-21 lead. They shot 12 of 16 from the field. I think they made 6 of their first 7 threes. Everything was easy. Everything was comfortable, until Carolina really turned up the pressure and started extending their defense, 94 feet. Not Cooper Flagg, but Drake Powell was able to draw some offensive fouls. They were able to get some steals and deflections. But I've said it all year long, man. Carolina gets energized when they play defense at a high level. And they play defense at a high level when they're aggressive, when they are full court pressing after a made basket or after a made free throw. If they're, coming out and trapping after a timeout. No matter what it is, this version of Carolina responds better to that than some past versions of Carolina. Notre Dame did not shoot the ball well today, so this isn't a team that you're going to want to look to cool down by any means, but you don't want to let them allow to get comfortable and get in rhythm and get into the flow of the game, and then let that confidence build. So for me, the first key for Carolina is getting back to playing the defense the way that you're capable of playing defense. We'd love to see Hubert full court press. I'd love to see them trap, coming out of a timeouts. I wouldn't be against seeing the 2-3 zone just to throw something different at Notre Dame, just to disrupt the rhythm. But, if Carolina's going to make a run in this tournament, it's going to start on the defensive end of the floor, and they need to get off to a fast start in that area tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see the full court pressure a little bit more, as we've been saying for the majority of the last 2 years. 2-3 zone, if they want to throw that out. But even if you're just going to be in the half court man-to-man, just being up in some of these guys, make them have to work, because this is a team that is exhausted. Their best player literally said so on the ACC network after the game. He said, I'm exhausted because we played 4 overtimes and then we just had to play this game for 40 minutes. They thought they were going to overtime in that game. So, I mean, for this group, they're going to come in here really feeling like they've played already 2 games in the last few days. And so for Carolina, I think that's one of the things that you've got to do is you've got to, be able to make them work and force them into some of these turnovers. They're a team that turns the ball over over 11 times per game. One of the worst teams in the country at turning the basketball over. So Carolina is going to have the opportunity to create those live ball turnovers, get out on the run, and finish some easy baskets. And if the game gets up and down, this team, with how exhausted they are not going to be able to compete with you. So that should be the goal for Carolina. Bring that pressure defensively and make a group of guys that are rather inexperienced find a way to make plays in this game. If they do, there's really nothing you can do about it, but it's got to start with your energy, your effort, and your enthusiasm on that defensive end of the court.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Carolina wants every game to be played up and down. They want these games to be track meets. They should want this one tomorrow even more. I mean, they should want this to be like the 100-yard, dash or whatever that you see in the Olympics, because you're talking about a Notre Dame team that just played 4 overtimes over the weekend, and that was on Saturday. They probably flew to Charlotte either late Saturday or early Sunday morning to begin preparation to play on Tuesday. And then on Tuesday, they had to go wire to wire to get a victory. Roy Williams would always talk about these kids, they're the kids. They should be able to bounce back and play no matter what. And I do subscribe to that theory to some degree. But this team's played a lot of basketball in a short span of time, and they don't have the depth that some teams are afforded to have, so they're really maxed out. So if Carolina can really get this game up and down, there's a scenario where Notre Dame could lose their legs in the first half, and no one could be upset at them. No one could blame them because how much basketball they've played in the last, 72 to 96 hours. So Carolina should be aware of that. And that should really make them come out, and really turn the volume up to 10 in terms of their aggression. Because, if this game is running up and down, I don't know if Notre Dame's legs will be able to keep up with them over the course of 20 minutes, let alone over the course of 40 minutes. Second key to the game, you want to see Carolina get back to rebounding the ball the way that they had rebounded the ball before the Duke loss. And look, part of that is Duke's the biggest team in the country, one of the best rebounding teams in the country, which is why we didn't ask Carolina to win the rebounding battle. We asked them to compete. That did not happen. They were down 13-2, I think, at the under 12 timeout, and they never really made they never really made Duke feel them on either end of the floor in terms of rebounding. But for me, like, as much as you want to control the defensive glass and limit the offensive opportunities for the opponent, you want to see Carolina get back to crushing that offensive glass. That's what elevated this offense to where they were scoring 90-plus every single game, when they were shooting over 50% from the field, over 50% from three, because they were grabbing their misses and they were converting. So, I'd like to see Vin Allen Lubin be the Vin Allen Lubin that he has been in 6 of the last 7 games, an offensive rebounding machine. Jalen Withers impact the game in that department as well, along with Drake Powell. So, Notre Dame's got, I think it's sneaky good size. I think it's size that kind of takes you by surprise, just how long they can be and how they can really, impact and disrupt the game. But we've seen Carolina go up against bigger teams than Notre Dame during the win streak and own them on the glass. You'd like to see Carolina get back to rebounding the ball the way they did during the winning streak, because that's another element that this team's going to have to bring with it this week if they want to make a deep run in Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the greatest rebounding team, but they're, middle of the pack. And one thing that they do a really good job of is limiting the offensive rebounds that teams can get. They average allowing just 8.8 offensive rebounds per game. So, I mean, that's the thing. Can Carolina create those second chance opportunities? If they do, because it's not a guarantee that Carolina is going to shoot great, shoot lights out. But what they were doing during that winning streak, as you mentioned, where they were creating those second chance points that were resulting in easy baskets and extending, certain scoring streaks, continuing to keep the team hot. That's what you've got to be able to do in this game. And then on the other end of the floor, We talked about controlling the pace. We talked about wanting to get up and down. The easiest way to do that is to rebound outside of course, creating turnovers. Well, you can't create 20, 30 turnovers in a game. I mean, if you can, then that's great. But the best way to do it is by just pulling down those defensive rebounds. Carolina didn't do a bad job, I thought, the other night on the defensive glass. To me, it was more about the lack of opportunities on the offensive glass. But this is a game where you can't allow a team like Notre Dame, who in the first matchup created some of those second chance looks. You can't allow them to do the same in this game. And they've got a couple of guys that, are, as you said, sneaky good rebounders that I think Carolina's got to be aware of, especially the man who has a last name that I believe sounds like it could be a complete name just altogether in Nikita Constant Navosky, I believe. I think I got that one right. I had it earlier today when they were saying it over and over again. But this guy, I mean, this was all he was pretty much doing out there for them in this game. He was, everywhere what they needed him to be on that defensive glass. So Carolina's got to be ready for that matchup inside against a couple of physical guys down low.
All right. The last key to the game for Carolina is they got to get back to shooting the ball the way they did going into the Duke game. A big reason why we thought Carolina could beat Duke was the way they were shooting the ball. Overall from the field, they were shooting well over 50% every time out, and they were shooting the ball very well from three. I think it was 48% shooting from behind the arc during the 6-game winning streak. Carolina, it's hard to grind out 2, 3, 4 wins when you got to play every single day. Like some teams are capable of doing it. I mean, NC State virtually did it every game last year during their run in the ACC tournament. But I think it would benefit Carolina if the Jalen Withers we saw before the Duke game shows back up and is making 2 to 3 threes. If Ian Jackson is taking those shots that are in the rhythm of the offense where he's isolated and the shots are going in. I think Cade Tyson will get to see playing time tomorrow. Can he provide Carolina with some perimeter scoring? And then, of course, R.J. Davis as well, a guy that, now that shooting percentage over 41% from the season and over 33% from behind the three-point line. No, those numbers aren't going to impress anybody. They're not sexy by any means, but given where those percentages were a month and a half ago, tells you how well he has shot the ball here as of late. All that and more needs to carry over and translate into this game to really set Carolina up for a situation to win 2-3 games over the next handful of days. So the final key is to get this offense back into rhythm, and it starts with ball movement. The ball was so stagnant, I thought, in the second half and the loss on Duke to Saturday. Good news is that Notre Dame's not have a big man that can switch on to anybody on the floor and stay in front of them. They don't have a guy like Cooper Flagg who is as good a weak and help side defender as you're going to find in college basketball. So Carolina's got to move the ball. They've got to rotate, make Notre Dame chase. But ultimately, you want to see the ball go in the basket. You want to get your guys cooking again. You want to see this offense back operating the way it was going into the Duke game last Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there are a couple of guys that you really look at in this case. I mean, you're hoping R.J. Davis continues to play the way that he's playing, but you need Seth Trimble to step back up and start making shots. 1 of 9 in the game against Duke is simply not going to cut it. And it's got to be early season Seth Trimble. You've got to get back to seeing that guy who can consistently knock down shots, who is attacking the basket. If he's able to do that, I think that sets you up for a lot of success. Ian Jackson, as you mentioned, taking shots that are in the rhythm of the offense, not taking the ball and turning it into an isolation game, which we've seen him do a few times this year. That's not what you necessarily need him to do. And look, go back to the first matchup. This was his career best performance of 27 points. So I think this is a team that he'll, hopefully remember that type of performance against, bring some confidence with them to this game and potentially be able to replicate that, at least to a certain extent, in this one. But you mentioned the biggest key. And to me, it's not even necessarily the ball movement. It is the players moving themselves. Everybody standing around watching the ball is not going to allow for the ball to be able to move. So you've got to be able to create some sort of separation by moving without the basketball. Carolina's offense just became a very ISO heavy in that second half against Duke. He needed to get back to a group that moves around, creates some space, and allows for those passes to move sides of the court. If they're able to do that, then I think that Carolina's offense can get back to what they were during the 6-game winning streak.
All right. Carolina enters the game with a 78.6% chance to win, according to ESPN's matchup predictor. I'll let you go first. Who wins and why?
I will go with Carolina in this game, and I think, to be honest, it's going to be a game that's very similar to the ones that we saw during that six-game winning streak. I think this team remains confident. I think that your best player is coming in playing pretty well. I know he didn't finish the game the other night all that well, but I think a lot of that was because of what Duke was doing defensively. I think this will be a game where he'll be more comfortable and hopefully can continue the rhythm that we saw early in that game that allowed him to score 20 points before Duke started taking him away. I think you'll see bounce back performances from guys like Ian Jackson, who killed this team the first time, like I said, and Seth Trimble. And ultimately, I just think Carolina's talent and depth is a little too much for a Notre Dame team that will be pretty tired going into this game. I like Carolina probably, somewhere in that 10 to 12 point range to advance on to Thursday's action.
Yeah, I think Carolina wins as well. I don't think R.J. Davis is ready to put on that uniform or ready to take off that uniform, so I think he'll play at an extremely high level. And I think this team, I don't think they worked as hard as they did to put themselves in the position where they still kind of control their own destiny, in a lot of people's opinion, to flame out with a loss to Notre Dame. Like, if they were to lose this game, this would be an embarrassment, and this would be a stain and a reminder of the underachievement that this season ultimately would have become. So I think Carolina plays at a high level. I think they play the brand of basketball they had played over the last 3.5 weeks leading up to this game. I think they get a rather comfortable win to set themselves up nicely to be as well rested as they could be going into the game against Wake Forest on Thursday, in what would be the quarterfinal action of the ACC tournament. No matter what happens, we'll have you covered on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Preview will be made available to you guys tomorrow morning. I will write that tomorrow and have that posted for you guys before the tip-off around 2:30 p.m. And, of course, we'll be back with the recap of the game as well, as we will take you through the ACC tournament and through the remainder of the season. Any news and notes that come out of spring practice for Bill Belichick, we'll have you covered on that as well. So busy time of the year for the website. Carolina landed another football recruit today as well. So make sure you get to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, every single morning, afternoon, and evening for the latest and the best Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There, we strongly encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. With that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank all of you for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.